Hello everybody, it's Mrs. Pound and I'm back with another video for Chapter 7.1 on the ecological landscape from Purposeful Designs Life Science. Today's section we're going to talk about is Section 712 on populations and communities. So our objectives today will be to describe the factors that affect population density and carrying capacity and explain how age structure affects populations. So when I talk about a population, I'm talking about a group of organisms of one species that live in the same place at the same time. Much like when we talk about the population of humans, we're counting how many humans are there. And so it's the same with different species. We can talk about the population of elephants in an area. So it's just one species that we're talking about with a population. With population, we can also talk about population density. This is the number of individual organisms of one species in a community. And the more individuals you have, the denser the population. The fewer you have, the less dense the population, much like density when we're talking about it with matter. The more you have, the more packed in they are, the denser. The more spread out they are, the less dense. Population density depends upon the amount of light, temperature, available food, nesting spaces, and available nutrients. So the more of these resources you have available, the denser the population can be. As we can see here, the trees and everything, actually more shrubs, small trees, are pretty dense in this area because the conditions are right. But if some of those conditions were to become less, such as maybe they're so close together that they're crowding out too much light, the population density might go down. The density varies depending on how much of these things are available in a given area. A high population density of one species can affect a community in an ecosystem, because that species might exhaust their food supply, so some would die of starvation. So we have a rabbit here, and if there were a lot of rabbits and they ate all the food in the area, then their population density would go down. But then the density would go down, the food source would replenish, and then it would go up and there would be more. So population density can fluctuate. Also, species that feed on them would probably flourish. So this fox that feeds on rabbits, there might become more foxes in that area, but then they would deplete the rabbits and that would go down, and then there would be fewer foxes. So populations affect one another. So my example is foxes and rabbits, just because I've noticed this in my own yard. I noticed that when were a lot of rabbits in my yard, I didn't see any foxes, but there were a lot of rabbits. Then all of a sudden, foxes moved in and hunted the rabbits, and the amount of rabbits went down, and then the fox moved out. And when they moved out, the rabbits replenished, and so on and so forth. So we can see these fluctuations in the population densities. We also talk about carrying capacity. This is the maximum number of organisms in a population that an environment can support over a long period of time. So it is the maximum that it can support. And it has a lot to do with population density as well. The higher the carrying capacity, the higher the population density in an area tends to be. And the carrying capacity for plants depends on factors such as available sunlight, water, and space. So you can see here there are a lot of trees and plants, and the amount that can be there depends upon those factors. As there are more trees, perhaps there will be less sunlight, and it will reach its carrying capacity, and there won't be able to be any more plants in that area. Also, we find that the mortality pattern for many animals shows a high death rate in the first year of life. This is for many different reasons, but that is why many organisms, such as these frog eggs you see in the background, they tend to have more offspring than will survive, and than the environment can even carry. If all of these were to survive the environment, it may even exceed the carrying capacity for the environment. But frogs, also tadpoles, tend to be prey for other organisms, so that's a reason that they don't survive disease. All sorts of things affect this, but high death rate tends to be in the first year of life. Also, if most organisms in a population are old, the population will most likely die. So, if all of these elephants were very old and about the same age, this population of elephants could be in trouble if there are not enough younger elephants, to take their place. And then there's the community. A community is the populations of different species living in the same space. So here we see a community in Africa, probably at a watering hole. We see some emus or ostriches, I'm not sure which. We see some giraffes and zebras and other kinds of animals in the background there. Those are all part of the community. And just like a human community, each of these animals has different jobs and different purposes for being there. So that is a community. So our objectives today were to describe the factors that affect population density and carrying capacity and explain how age structure affects populations. Don't forget your 5 questions in your notes and keep watching to answer the questions at the end of the video.